Well, good evening, everybody. Great to have you all here. Hope you're all somewhere warm and well wrapped up. It's absolutely freezing here. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Matthew Jarron. I'm the museum curator here at the University of Dundee, and we're delighted to be hosting this very special online event with Cat and Ashanti. So this is tying in with the exhibition that we currently have on in the Lamb Gallery at the University of Dundee called Bacchanal. I think that's all I need to say. So I'm delighted to hand over to Cat Dunn, who has curated this wonderful exhibition. And Cat, I'll leave you to take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So nice to see you. I just first and foremost, because it's very cold, I don't know where you guys are, but it's absolutely freezing. It's about -6. So Ashanti and I are going to invite you to grab a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, a glass of water, a glass of wine, a shot of rum, depending on where you are. And for the next hour, you're just going to kick back and lime with us. Liming in the Caribbean is just basically doing exactly that. It's just kicking back, relaxing, chilling out, letting the cares of the day go away, and having a good time. Hopefully, we're going to take you through that. So this talk is the satellite event for Bacchanal, Let Me Be Free, which I created based around the very lovely Ashanti Harris's work, and I'll get to that in 2 minutes. First, though, I'm going to give you some information you might or might not know about carnivals and why it was important to create this this experience and this exhibition. So every island carnival is different, like that is fact. So we start with the Carnival of Brazil, which is an annual Brazilian festival held the Friday afternoon before Ash Wednesday. And it marks the beginning of Lent, the 40-day period before Easter. It's meant to celebrate the beginning of Catholic Lent. It's perhaps the most well-known street party in the world. And it's an incredible spectacle of samba dancing, live music in the streets, world-class parades, colorful costumes, and a vibrant revelry. We then go on to Trinidad and Tobago. Second biggest carnival in the world. Also an annual event, which is usually held on the Monday and Tuesday before Ash Wednesday. The event is well known for participants' colorful, costumes and celebrations. And part of the celebrations include something called Juve Morning, where celebrations involve the participants being doused in oil, mud, and powder. So basically, you just wear clothes that you never, ever want to see again. And then you go on, you kind of stay until 6 in the morning, you go back to your house or your hotel, and you get changed in a costume, then you jump like mad for 2 days, eat lots, and drink a lot of rum. 9 months later, there's a massive baby boom. It's a whole thing. And this was originated with Italian Catholics in Europe, and then later spread to the French and Spanish, who of course brought it to Trinidad, Dominica, Haiti, Martinique, and other Caribbean islands. On the island of Barbados, we're a little bit different. Our carnival is called Crop Over, and it's the first Monday in August. So Crop Over is a traditional harvest festival which began in Barbados, having had its early beginnings on the sugarcane plantations during slavery. It's a summer festival in Barbados. It's the most popular one, and its origins can be traced back to the 1780s, at a time when Barbados was the world's largest producer of sugar for the British Empire. At the end of the sugar season, there was also a youth celebration to mark the culmination of another successful sugarcane harvest, so the Crop Over Festival. And what was interesting about this was that the slaves, the people who actually did the cutting, the planting, the everything, only was given half a day. But in 1940s, the festival was terminated completely. It was revived again in 1974. Other elements of Bajan culture and African culture were weaved into it, and that becomes the extravaganza it is today. And then we have the states. In the southern states of the US, there's Mardi Gras, which is in all over Louisiana, including the city of New Orleans. Celebrations are concentrated for about 2 weeks before and through say, again, the day before Ash Wednesday. So you're beginning to see a theme. And usually there's one major parade each day, and many days can have several large parades. If that is not correct, my American posse, please reach out and tell me. So carnivals, of course, as I said, don't just happen in the Caribbean. It's pretty much all over the world. In Britain, of course, there's a Notting Hill Carnival, and it's an annual Caribbean Carnival festival that has taken place in London since 1966, strangely the year that Barbados became independent from Britain. And it's on the streets of the Notting Hill around Kensington each August over 2 days. And we also have the Toronto Carnival, known as Caribana, which is an annual Caribbean Carnival celebration held in Toronto, Canada every summer. And it's usually attended by over 1 million people, and is apparently North America's largest carnival celebration. I'm pretty sure that New Orleans might disagree with that. But anyway, here we go. So it's my immense pleasure, after giving you that information, to introduce you to the ever lovely, ever talented Ashanti Harris. Ashanti is a multidisciplinary visual artist and researcher, and she works with dance, performance, and sculpture. She has a focus on recontextualizing historical narratives. And it's all about the movement of people, ideas, and things, and the wider social implications of these movements. Ashanti is also co-director for Project X, which is a creative education program platforming dance and performance from the African and Caribbean diaspora. Hi.
Hi.
So nice to have you. So glad you're alive.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. Yeah, everyone, as a little catch up, I was on a flight that was delayed from 9 p.m. last night until 9 a.m. this morning. So I'm a little bit delirious, but starting to perk up with a little bit of coffee.
It'll all add to it. It'll be fine. So for those of you who don't know, when Matthew approached me about maybe doing some work with the museum of creating an exhibition, I really wanted to play around with aspects of carnival, and I wasn't really sure which direction to go. But then I remembered that Ashanti had done this amazing performance during kind of August, September. Yeah, and within that there were drums and steel pans, and I called her up, being the chancellor that I am, and asked if I could use them within the exhibition. So the entire exhibition is basically around this concept of carnival, but also the drums, the music. You would have heard this when you were first coming into the Zoom. And for us in the Caribbean, music is our soul, you know, steel pans and drums are our voice. And so this for me was really instrumental in being able to build up the entire exhibition. But I wonder, Ashanti, if you could kind of tell me, let's talk a little bit first about Dance Over the Quadrille, because if you didn't do that, we would not have these amazing drums. So I guess the things I would like to know is, what was your inspiration for the performance? And then following on from that, can you tell us about your incredible dancers that were part of the performance, and actually how everything all came together, and what gave you the idea for drums?
Yeah, let me just for anyone that didn't see the exhibition, I just have found a few images. Let me see if I can share screen in the classic sense. I haven't practiced this, so hopefully it just works.
Just go for it.
Great. Yeah, perfect. Great. So the exhibition was called Dancing a Peripheral Quadrille, and it was commissioned by Edinburgh Sculpture Workshop for Edinburgh Art Festival. And when they first got in touch with me and asked me to do the exhibition, it was I was thinking, I'd done a residency there, and I was thinking about the kind of sculptural elements that exist, the sculptural practices that exist within Carnival, but also thinking about the kind of like community making, of collective community making, and all of the different roles, all of the different sort of identities, skills that feed into creating a carnival. And at the same time, I was also reading this book by an artist, a writer from Trinidad called Faustin Charles, called Signpost of the Jumbeam. And Signpost of the Jumbeam is a story about, I guess, all of the ways that the past finds a form in the present. It's about a person who is repeatedly going back in time and coming back and asking to go back in time and coming back. But the part of the book that I was really specifically kind of holding on to whilst I was making this exhibition is a chapter that is written with absolutely no punctuation, no grammar. It's like a continuous flow of consciousness. It is like a procession in words. It's just going and going and going and flowing and going. And in this chapter, it's written from the perspective of the main character, who is a carpenter. And this carpenter is talking about the carnival that he's seeing in front of him. He's watching carnival go past him, and he's describing everything that he's seeing. That he's a maker, he's a carpenter, and he's played a massive role in building the carnival. So he's describing it from a material perspective and a process-based making perspective. So the physical things that he had to do to make certain elements, the materials that he's working with. He's referencing gold leafing, he's referencing glitter, rhinestone, sequins, mirror. He's referencing all of these different materials that he has worked with, but he's also referencing all of these different cultures that are finding different forms in the different troupes. And the more you kind of pay attention, you realize that he's actually referencing all of the different historical narratives that have become a part of what we now know of today as Caribbean culture, Caribbean heritage, Caribbean identity. So he's talking about African influence, Indian influence, Chinese influence, Amerindian influence. He's also talking about the European processes of colonization that also feed into Caribbean identity. He's talking about Portuguese, French, English. And then towards the end, it's one of those things when you know something about the history of the Caribbean and its relationship to colonialism, you can look at this kind of troupe that, I don't know, of a marching, let's say a people inspired by the French kind of army. And there's an insidious background to it, but it's also glitzy and it's sequined and it's dancing and it's almost like it exists in these two ways at the same time. And in the book, they really play with this. The final troops that they talk about, they're calling it the American Band, and they're describing what actually doesn't have any glitz or glamour attached to it. It's a very detailed description of war, and I guess it was written in the 80s, and it's also a detailed description of these kind of processes of colonization that are happening in that moment. And it doesn't have the glitz and the glamour. The author is presenting it as a really stark contrast. And there's just something about this chapter that kind of got me thinking about that tension of these two things existing in Carnival, and Carnival being this time of, I guess, you pay homage to your ancestry, homage to your heritage, you physically embody your heritage, but it's also a time that you process the complications of these histories as well. So that was something that I wanted to make in this exhibition. So just flicking through. So the exhibition was a series of sculptures inspired by carnival costumes, and I worked with 3 dancers to create a performance that also explored these same things and the different identities that come together to create a new collective identity for Carnival. The dancers that I worked with, they come from very different dance backgrounds. So KJ, who you can see in this photo, KJ has Caribbean heritage and I've worked with KJ for a long time on carnival dancing. He has a lot of knowledge of carnival dancing, specific carnival characters, and has this incredible skill of bringing these different characters to life for his movement. I was also working with a dancer. This is Jess. So Jess is really trained. Jess also has Caribbean heritage and is really trained in European dance styles. And I really liked kind of sitting some of Jess's dance styles alongside some of KJ's dance styles and seeing the relationship come out there. And then this is Hamsha, who is trained in Bharatanatyam, traditional Indian dancing. And again, we were making new choreographies together. We were thinking about how we could sort of build a collective identity that was built of everyone's individual identity. But there was a gorgeous sort of relationship between Hamsha's hands gestures that were coming in from Barton Atayam, and then some of the hand gestures that KJ is doing, and then also some of the hand gestures that Jess are doing, because actually this kind of this conversation has been happening between these cultures for a really, really long time. And it was nice to like make those connections through the movement. And you can kind of, so these pictures I've got are mostly from the performance, but you can see in the background, there is a steel pan float. And the steel pan float is the sculptures that Kat was talking about for this exhibition. So I was also thinking about all of these different kind of peripheral relationships between the Caribbean and the rest of the world, particularly in relation to colonization. And so we are in Scotland. Scotland is an oil producing country, and something that I had come across recently was Aberdeen was twinned with Georgetown, which is the capital of Guyana, the country that my family are from. And I started getting a little bit deeper into this relationship between Aberdeen and Georgetown, and found out that the reason that the twinning of these two towns had happened was because Georgetown had at that time made a huge discovery of oil and was going to become an oil producing, it was already a tiny bit of an oil producing nation, but was going to become a sort of massive oil producing nation. And so all of these kind of little kind of peripheral connections between places, once you kind of start to look towards your peripheral, everything is right there. So I'd kind of been following all of these threads, thinking about the relationship between Scotland and Guyana. In some previous projects, I'd been looking at that. There's a particular relationship between the Highlands of Scotland and Guyana through the transatlantic slave trade in the 1790s I'd looked at in a previous project. So I was kind of moving between looking at these historical relationships and the kind of traces that exist in both landscapes, and also this contemporary relationship, and starting to just kind of unpick what all of it means, and doing that through making these objects and doing that through working with dancers. So these steel pans are made from oil drums, but they haven't been bashed into, they don't have a tune yet, they haven't been tuned. So they're still flat on top. They're I think of them as steel pans in the making. They don't know what bands they're part of. They don't know what their tune is yet. They don't know what they're playing, but they are in the process of figuring out. And that's partly because that was how I was feeling whilst I was making this exhibition. I wanted to put them on a float, which was inspired by early Notting Hill Carnival in London. When they first brought Carnival to London, the steel pans were on scaffolding, floats made from scaffolding. And it was this idea that there wasn't a lot of money, there wasn't a lot of funding, but there was a lot of will from a community to create something. So like access to materials at hand, also looking at the different industries that people from the Caribbean who came over in the early to mid 20th century, the industries that they were working in, and how materials from those industries were also featuring in an informal way in Carnival, like through these scaffolding floats. So I wanted to create sculptures that were referencing this history, whilst also maybe kind of untangling this sort of complicated relationship between Scotland and the Caribbean now. So the drums were playable, they had sticks with them, people could come and play them. It was really lovely to have some actual drummers and pan players come and try and play them, but they're not tunes. So when you play them, they have this kind of off clang, like something is not quite right. And the idea is this sounds, that this object that looks like Carnival but sounds like something else, it's really kind of asking the audience to think about that, think about why that might be, think about what might be off, and to do their own kind of digging into their understanding of these kind of peripheral conversations, peripheral relationships that are happening around them.
Thank you. Yeah, for me, the minute that I started to think about this exhibition, I thought that your drums were a pivotal point to it, because within the Caribbean, within Carnival in general, drums, especially steel drums, are like such a great importance, as you just said, to the Caribbean. And traditionally, they're made from the bottoms of 55-gallon oil barrels. And the steel pan also known as steel drums, was created in Trinidad and Tobago in the 1930s. And it was established in context of kind of carnival resistance. Its history obviously being traced back to the enslaved Africans who were brought to the Caribbean in the 1700s and were told not to use drums. And as it turned out, kind of the plantation owners were right, because the drums in each plantation spoke to other drums. And this is how the revolution started, especially in Barbados. So for me, the drums were really an important aspect in order to kind of base as a jump off point, I suppose. And also then having knowing that the music, you know, and as a performer and as a dancer, you will know this, you kind of listen to the drum beat. That's the thing that carries, you know, everything else. And if the, you know, in terms of voodoo, especially, again, it's drums that kind of really carry that melody. And so I really wanted an aspect of the exhibition to really feature quite heavily on it. But I'm going to move us away a little bit from this amazing performance and the drums. And obviously each of us has our own different lived experiences. So have you actually been to Carnival either here or in the Caribbean? And what were your thoughts about it, if you were? And then we can have a little chat about that, because again, this was, I just came back from Venice Biennale for the second time. And again, one of the things that struck me was Alberto Vito's amazing work, because it just took me right back to being in the Caribbean. So this was probably one of the things we have not actually spoken about. I'm really interested to know if you've actually experienced Carnival for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, shall I start? I'll stop screen share and come back. So yeah, as I said, I'm from Guyana, but most of my family live in Barbados. So I have been to crossover, mostly as an audience going crossover, mostly as I'm just going to watch. But I grew up in Leeds in England, and Leeds is the second biggest carnival in the UK, Leeds West Indian Carnival. It also started in the 60s, and it feels like a really important part of who I am as an adult, who I am as a maker, as a sculptor, as a performer, and a really important part of, I guess, like my story. So I used to perform in Leeds Carnival every year when I was a kid with my little sister. I did it with my school. I did it with my dance group. I did it with different communities, depending on what my family was doing at the time. But it's a really kind of staple of my childhood. And I guess the thing that I really loved about Leeds West Indian Carnival is that, I guess, the other difference that I felt from when I was going to Cropover in Barbados is it has this relationship to longing that Carnival, I feel it in Cropover as well. It's like longing like a longing for a history or another land or a past. But there's something about diasporic carnivals that just it's like a longing that all of a sudden finds some kind of, not necessarily resolution, but some kind of catharsis. So you have that opportunity to channel your longing as a community, your longing for a place, or your longing for belonging, into creating something together, whether when you're being on the costume making team, whether you're being on the outfit making, like whoever you're working with, whether you're playing. I also used to play steel pans when I was a kid. I had 1 year being on the float with the pan band, or whether you're dancing. It's this idea that you can kind of have this kind of catharsis release of your longing. And those kind of different corners along the route that celebrate the different Caribbean communities that have been in that place, and just kind of walking this specifically chosen route and just feeling like you are home when maybe the rest of the time everybody is actually feeling like you're not home. So Caribbean Leeds West Indian Carnival is definitely my main kind of point of reference when I was making this piece of work. And yeah, it's such a like incredible event run by amazing people. There was actually in 2019 or 2018, they had 50 years of
Wow.
Indian Carnival, and it was the most epic celebration, but also really wonderful because all of these kind of people who were really instrumental in the building of not just the building of the carnival actually, but the maintaining of the carnival, keeping it going through funding cuts, through world events, through everything else that kind of was putting the carnival at risk of stopping. It was really wonderful to celebrate those people and that kind of community effort that has made something something that I can stand and say is so impactful to me, and I know it's so impactful to so many other people in Leeds as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think obviously for me it's Barbados will always kind of be the #1 carnival for me, no matter where I've gone. I've done so many Trinidad and Tobago carnivals. You go in on a Thursday and you party nonstop, you line, you party, you line, you party. And then Sunday morning, Juve morning, you get covered in oil and mud and dirt, and pay the piper, pay the devil is what they used to say. And whether you give money to charity or not, you still got covered in oil, mud, and dirt. So you go back and you kind of throw those clothes down, you put on your costumes, and then you go and jump for 2 days solid. Lots of rum as kind of the incentive. But at the end of that, on the Wednesday, I would always find myself like on a flight or boat going over to Tobago because my feet needed salt water. It needed the sand. It needed to calm down. It was crazy. Also, I needed to like seriously get all the alcohol out of my system. Barbados Carnival for me is a little bit different. Trinidad Carnival was a lot of fun. You know, Barbados Carnival is home. You know, Barbados is motherland. And I was flag girl about 4 times during my life of growing up. So for those of you who don't know, being a flag girl is very important to the band. You are the person who rallies everybody else on to whine, to carry on, to walk up, to get down, to do all these things. And it was that you have to have skill to carry a large band or a portion, a section of the band, whichever you're in charge of. And you're also the person who gets the judges riled up to really want to give this band points and stuff. But for me, all that aside, the drinking, the partying, the being in costume, the being fitted, the having the crown, whatever, the music, what amazes me about Carnival is that it's the one day that everyone is equal. There's no rich, there's no poor, there's no, I live on a plantation, there's no, you know, I'm going to cover my hands to not to show my status in life. There's none of that. In Carnival, everyone is equal. Everyone is looking for a good time. Everyone is looking to party. You're dancing, you know, we say it's walking up. So it's a wind down to the ground, come back up. It's just why my knees are probably messed up. But you do that enough times, there's this massive music truck. And there's, you know, you go up to the bar and there's just like whatever drink you want. Rum and beer is normally the thing. At some points when you look, you're dying, to give you water. But you're in the band and you feel as one. You know, this band is jumping. We're gonna win the awards. We're gonna be getting on bad to Road March, whatever. And you really, in that moment in time, everyone is equal. And that's one of the things I love about Carnival. But there was this one place that I jumped past every year in, year out, and it was kind of my bathroom point. And my grandmother had friends in the area, so I would always see the green gates of the psychiatric institution coming up as you hit Blackrock, and I'd be like, okay, Grammy's friend is like around the corner. And it was like this entire thing. We were like 2 weeks before, I would go like, Grammy, can you please ask Mrs. So-and-so if I can please come and use her bathroom? And you know, you would kind of skitter off and run and go to the bathroom, and you'd come back, and you'd always come back with a sandwich, because she's like, you need something to soak up all that rum. Here, have a dumpling, have a this, have a that. So you're going to the bathroom. It's a decent bathroom and getting food. Yay. bonus. So you come back into the your section, everybody's like, where did you get food from? You can't ask me that. But always I would see my grandmother at the end of the road, and I would always be like, tell Mrs. So-and-so, thank you, love you, love you. Here's a rum, bye. And off you go again until you hit Spring Garden Highway. And at that point, your costume became a swimsuit or a bikini because the beach is right there and you need to soak your feet. It is hot. You've been jumping for miles. And literally then you, of course, go in the sea, and then you come up going like, how am I getting home now? And this is something that every single person experiences. What was interesting for me was the first time I saw our mutual friend Alberto Vito's work was the Green Gates. And it was instantly that kind of punch in the face of taking me back into that moment in a very skimpy costume, jumping past the Green Gates, because that moment brought me a lot of joy and equally a lot of sorrow, because my grandmother's no longer with us, and it just took me back to that moment of needing for her, blackmail her so I could go to her friend's house to use the bathroom. And so for me, yeah, Carnival has very warm, fuzzy memories, and it is definitely that moment in time of everyone for 2 hours, 3 hours, however long it takes to jump from the National Stadium down to Spring Garden to be equal. So can we talk a little bit about Caribbean music? For everyone who came in, the song that was playing was actually for us Caribbean soca. It's called soca or kaiso, and it's normally, we have raunchy ones, of course, and we have ones that are social commentary. And the one that was playing when everyone came into the room was the social commentary one. And it was basically that Barbados, the Minister of Tourism, was selling off a lot of the beach land to hoteliers, and we then weren't allowed to go onto the beaches. And it was this big uproar of, our navel string is buried here. You can't tell us to do this. And so the mighty Gabby Calypsonian made this song, and it went to Road March, and it was crazy and insane. And so I kind of wanted to bring it back a little bit, because in your performance, the beat of the music had a very Caribbean tone. Was that deliberate, or did you really just want that aspect of Carnival as well?
Yeah, that was absolutely deliberate. It was so I love working with sound, and I've got way more into sound work over the pandemic, when as a sort of digital maker, I would always choose working with sound over working with moving images, because I'm a live performance person through and through. But for this project, for all projects, I like to think about ways that you can work with sound sculpturally. So ways that you can take it as a material and kind of like twist it, elongate it, stretch it, and turn it into something new. I'm really inspired by dub music and the use of sampling. And I guess this sampling is like another form of collage. It's like taking lots of little pieces that have a narrative attached to them and kind of reforming them to create a new narrative. It feels like it's also another really good metaphor for what Carnival is as well. So I was kind of trying to work with a bit of a dub methodology for making this work. So all of the tracks, I had really great conversations with Jess, KJ in Hampshire about the songs that represent, we were working with this phrase like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and thinking about where back is for us, like this idea of like back homing, or what you're doing is in Carnival as back homing. And that's also referencing Grace Nichols, the Guyanese poet, talks about back homing a lot in her work. All of the different ways that you perform that back. And when we were working on the choreographies and thinking about this idea of like what forward is to us, but where back and back homing is to us, we were also sharing tracks that to us represent that. And that was another thing that was really gorgeous, because so also again, all coming from different Caribbean cultures, and Hampshire from Sri Lankan culture, sharing these music, and again, like seeing all of the crossovers and all of the yeah, all of these connections between also lots of different ages in the performers and myself, and still seeing all of these same things being referenced. A track that, a Michelle Montano track that Jess shared as part of hers, it has been sampled in this quite a lot, because I had found out that actually the drum beat in that opens the beginning of the track is a Nyabingi drum beat, which also is like referencing like a long cultural history, cultural heritage. But I wanted to play with it sculpturally. So again, it's like moments of it being stretched out, elongated, reversed, playing with like the way that you can manipulate a drum beat in editing so that it sounds like a heartbeat, the way that you can manipulate a drum beat so that it sounds like breath, also that it sounds like the flapping of wings. I was really lucky. I was working with a really great editing company called Nice Colors, who do sound and visuals. So yeah, it's also really helpful to have someone where you can say, okay, what happens if you do this, this, and this, and then they can just show you. But yeah, the tracks in this are completely using that dub methodology, this idea of like taking off these tracks and resampling them, but also kind of molding and manipulating them to create something new that represents all four of us, and in that moment.
I'm so happy to hear you say Michelle Montano. I was there grinning. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I damaged my knees to him a lot. That's all I'm gonna say about that. So get your flag up in the hand, you know, and you're going and everybody in the stadium is jumping up like mad people and he's on stage whipping us into a frenzy. Yes.
Yeah, so, in the track there was Michelle Montano was sampled, Patrice Roberts was sampled, who does like, yeah, and Dripati, who does kind of chutney soca, was in it. Yeah, there was some classics hidden in the soundtrack.
I love the use of dub as well. I'm just looking through my little playlist here. I do have a Michelle Montano one, which I will play when we're coming up to a close, I think. What was interesting for me in doing this research was finding out that there was carnival in Dundee. This was like major shock. And it, again, Matthew and I discussed this, and it was really, yeah, when I started to do research, I was like, Dundee, carnival, what now? But what was interesting was that there were, you know, Black musicians in Dundee. And so then I started to look at the fact that, well, obviously they've brought, just like we bring it to Notting Hill, like, you know, to all these different places, they clearly brought it to Dundee, but it was not necessarily in the way that we understand carnival. And that was quite interesting to kind of delve into a little bit as well, because carnival exists in so many different forms, right? I mean, there is carnival all over the UK. It's not necessarily carnival that we do as in tiny little costumes and jumping around, because the sun is not the same. But in terms of carnival rides and always, again, having that music element, I thought it was really important to also add that into the exhibition to show that there is actually, and you've said it before, there's this cross culmination, you know, through the Atlantic slave trade, and obviously then there's also the Windrush generation, etc. So, you know, where we go, our music goes with us, I think. And it was very interesting to kind of find that out and really be able to explore that element, and also to understand that there were other aspects of Scotland that had other forms of carnival that they kind of turned to themselves. So with the carnival in Dundee, for me, it was very much about the equivalent of, like, you know, the tobacco lords, I guess, bringing it back into their little aspect and recreating it in such a way that the local community could really understand it and comprehend it. I don't think that they would have quite understood if they suddenly rocked up with some skimpy little costumes and started running around the fife. But it was just an interesting experience to find that information out, and also to figure out how to layer it in such a way within the exhibition that it also that the community could see themselves, I suppose, and be able to understand that this was also an important aspect. Because to be quite frank, when somebody says Dundee to me, I do not think carnivals, but now I know differently. And I thank Matthew and the entire team for digging that information out, because that was very interesting to kind of have the layers and crossovers. And for me, it's about, as I stand between two countries, I suppose, knowing what I know about Caribbean carnivals, and being able to then stand up in Dundee and go like, okay, there's a carnival here. It's not what I know, but there is fun and joy in music. So how do we merge that into kind of the one aspect? For anyone who's already gone and seen the exhibition, you will understand what I'm talking about. Yeah.
I wanted
yes,
to
of course.
add into that as well. So you sort of meant, I work with an organization called Project X, and we kind of celebrate dance from the African and Caribbean diaspora in Scotland. And a really important thing when we first started was participating in the carnivals that exists now. They're not Caribbean carnivals, so for us it was really about how do we bring our culture into the Scottish carnivals that exist. The Winter Carnival and the Merchant City Festival in Glasgow is run by this organisation called Bridgman Arts, run by someone called Noel Bridgman, who has a background in community arts, but also Caribbean heritage. And I don't know if Noel would say this, but I think that kind of connection to carnival, or like this recognizing the importance of carnival, and this like music, dance, people, food, like as a way to kind of bring communities together and celebrate. I feel like Noel's Caribbean heritage will also be contributing to the way that he kind of continuously puts so much effort into creating these incredible carnivals in Glasgow. And I wanted to share a picture because this is our Scottish Caribbean African amalgamation carnival, Christmas carnival that we did. This isn't the first carnival.
Oh wow.
This was the second carnival. So this is the Project X Young Dancers. And this carnival was for the Winter Carnival, but it was inspired by limbo. So you can see now both have got a long limbo stick. And we've been learning about limbo, we've been practicing limbo. And some people in Project X have Caribbean heritage, some people have African heritage, so we were also talking about limbo across the different cultures. Some people have spent their entire lives in Scotland, so they're talking about limbo in Scotland. We did lots of learning how to do it, trying to get better and better and better at it. And we created this, we called it like the Christmas limbo troupe. And it's the kind of inspiration behind it is that the limbo stick is so cold and the ground is so cold, so you really want to make sure
you want to avoid
either of them. So this is our Scottish, Caribbean, African carnival troupe that is an amalgamation of all of these cultures together. And I just think it's that is the most gorgeous thing to me about
it's amazing.
Yeah, just bringing all of these things into the present moment. And the music we had the soca music and a little wheelie speaker with us. It was great.
Yes, I remember limbo sticks, but they were on fire.
Yeah. Yeah,
much nicer. So So I guess I wanted to now find out if there are any questions from the audience. I also want to play you, we've played you a kind of, as I said, soca is divided into two categories. One is very raunchy, which normally goes for Road March, Monarch. And that person is crowned for an entire year. Their music is played everywhere. And one is more social commentary. So as you were coming in, we played you social commentary. And I thought that as we're coming to close, after the questions, I'm going to play you one of the raunchy ones. Just for you to kind of get a flavor of the difference. But I guess before we really do that, I just wanted to check if there were any questions, if anyone needed any clarification, if there are any comments for either myself or Ashanti, before we start to wrap up.
There's nothing in the chat at the moment, but folks, please do type in the chat. While people are doing that, I was going to ask a question of you, Cat, if that's all right, just to put you on your toes. So you are, of course, doing your PhD at the Art College here. So it'd be great to maybe...
Yeah, one of my supervisors, I see his name.
I see Graham is here. So maybe you could tell people a little bit more about the research that you're doing and how this kind of fits into that broader area.
Wow. That is a question. Thanks, Matthew. I suddenly lost every thought in my head. My research is based on Black women artists, specifically targeting two moments in time, 1980 to 82 and 2020 to 22. One, when Black women was forced to self-curate, and one where two Black women represented England and Scotland at Venice Biennale, with Sonia Boyce bringing home the gold lion, which is a monumental, just for anyone who is a Black artist, we were just like in shock. And that was really important, but also what they do, how does that inspire me as a curator and the stories that I want to tell, the people I want to work with, the collaborators, the allies, and why this is important, especially now. This exhibition for me it's about Carnival, as I said, for me is about fun. It's for enjoyment. It brings back really happy memories of moments where you could see that everyone was getting along. You could see tourists standing up a little bit frozen while the local girls did a whine on them and kept going like, what's wrong with your hips? Like, no, go down, go down. But in that moment in time, everyone was equal. And I think that right now we live in such a politically divisive world that trying to remember those moments are really important and really indicative of what possibilities could be, and also working collaboratively with people that you trust and that you know will deliver are equally important. For me, doing the Carnival was a little bit like an escape, I guess, a little bit from my PhD. But actually, I'm probably going to write up a little bit about it because it does have, it has legacies, and legacies are important. And for me, Carnival is not only an homage to Carnival, but it reminds me of my grandmother, and it reminds me of jumping around with a flag in my hand and rallying people. And kind of, I do that now as a curator, in a different way. I don't run around bikinis, but and I'm working with amazing artists that I get to call friends, and taking that energy and allowing my research to influence my practice and my practice to influence my research. And this is this kind of interesting yin and yang that's going on. So yeah, I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but that's the answer.
That's an excellent answer.
Thank you.
There's some nice positive comments in the chat, but no questions. So I think you've been let off the hook there. So I just wanted to actually, before we sort of round off then, I'll just to thank, on behalf of everyone, thank both of you for what's been, I think, really insightful, but also enormously entertaining evening. So thank you both so much indeed. And it's great to have, particularly when it's so cold outside, to have a little bit of Caribbean environment, I think definitely helps.
Thanks to everyone who's been to the exhibition. For those of you who haven't gone, please do go and see it. Before it's really hard to make sure that it's entertaining and it's also educational. Thanks to everyone. Thank you, Matthew, for hosting us. Thank you, Ashanti, for coming out of your bed to doing this. I hope that you go and get some sleep now. To everyone in the audience, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Yeah, as I said, go get a glass of rum and lime. It's a cold night. Peace.
Thanks, Kat.
Thanks very much. Cheerio, everyone.
Bye.